Today, we open the listener line for your questions on building relationships with Dr. Gary Chapman.
I am trying to figure out what her love language is.
What do you think about getting on dating sites?
What's the best way for me to love her, even though I can't really see her or talk to her?
Singles who are actually already parents, where do we belong, I guess?
Welcome to Building Relationships with Dr. Gary Chapman, author of the New York Times Bestseller, The 5 Love Languages. It's one of the most anticipated conversations of the month when we open the listener line and hear from you as you pose questions for Dr. Chapman. And we have some great questions today on our March edition of Dear Gary.
And it's our hope that something you hear today will help you in your marriage, maybe your parenting, maybe in your singleness. If you go to buildingrelationships.us, you'll find more simple ways to strengthen your relationships. You can call and leave a question as well for an upcoming program. If you hear something today and you say, hey, I want to ask Dr. Chapman about that, 866-424-GARY is our number. Leave your message. We'll try to get to it on a future broadcast. 1-866-424-GARY. We'd love to hear from you today. Our featured resource is a book by Dr. Chapman, A Teen's Guide to the 5 Love Languages, How to Understand Yourself and Improve All Your Relationships. We have it linked at buildingrelationships.us. And Gary, you're going to hear some parents today scratching their heads about the love language of their offspring, but this is for the teenager himself or herself to read and work through, isn't it?
Yes, Chris, and I'm really glad about this book because I think it's going to stimulate some communication between teenagers and their parents. You know, parents have often read The 5 Love Languages of Teenagers or the other book, The 5 Love Languages of Children, but the children haven't read them. But now that they're teenagers, I felt like, you know, if they have a book for themselves where they're reading this concept, and how it applies in their relationship with their parents, their siblings, and other extended family members and friends, it would create some really good conversation between parents and those teenagers. So I'm excited about this book for anyone who has a teenage son or daughter or a teenage grandson or granddaughter. Yes. Get this book for them, and I can almost guarantee you'll have some good conversations about the whole concept.
It's called A Teen's Guide to the 5 Love Languages. We have it linked at the website, buildingrelationships.us. How to understand yourself and improve all your relationships. That's a big target right there, but boy, it might happen because of this. What a gift. A Teen's Guide to the 5 Love Languages. Go to buildingrelationships.us. All right, now to your calls. First up, let's hear from a mom who is trying to solve a mystery.
Hi, Gary. I have a 23-year-old daughter. I am trying to figure out what her love language is. I know it's not touch. She doesn't really like to be hugged terribly much, and she doesn't really like to talk much, so that's probably not one. So I'm looking for ways that I can grow with her and love on her and be there for her without being too much for her. She does live at home at the moment. If you could answer that, I would really appreciate it. Have a blessed day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I would suggest you give her a gift of the 5 love languages for singles, which applies the love language concept to the parents, to the siblings, to the roommates, college roommates. Well, sure, she's living at home now, or their dating partners, or any close relationship. If you give it to her and say to her, you know, this book is written specifically for singles, I wonder if you would read it and tell me what you think of it. Just the fact that she'll be reading it is going to help her understand the concept so that then you can really talk about the relationship and her love language. Of course, there is also online, 5lovelanguages.com, there's a free quiz for single adults, which help them discover their primary language. But I think her reading the singles book first would make it much more meaningful for her and for you.
It's called The 5 Love Languages Singles Edition, or 5 Love Languages for Singles, the secret that will revolutionize your relationships. And there it is again. It's something that you understand about yourself, but it's not just about you. It's about how others interact with you, what you're looking for. And I love it that this mom says, I just really want to express love to her, but I don't know if it's getting through. And maybe she is getting through in some way, but she doesn't know, what that way is with her 23-year-old. That's why you came up with this, right?
Yeah, and that's why I think the single adult reading the book, it's going to open up a conversation, make it easy to talk about this topic with that single adult.
Again, if you go to the website, 5lovelanguages.com, you can take that free assessment for singles or others and see the book that Gary just mentioned, 5 Love Languages for Singles, as well as a teen's guide to the 5 love languages. So you can go to 5lovelanguages.com or buildingrelationships.us. We've got you covered right there. All right, Gary, you've answered this next question for younger callers. It concerns relationships and technology.
Hi, Gary. I'd like to know, what do you think about getting on dating sites if you're interested in dating? I've been a widow now for 10 years. I want to get back into dating, looking forward to getting married again. So I was just wondering, what did you think about these dating sites? All right, thank you.
It's been very interesting over the last several years how many people have shared with me that they actually met each other through one of the online dating sites. In the early stages, I was a little leery of that because you can't really reveal your whole self or really get to know another person just simply by doing things online. But it is amazing that there have been many people who are meeting the person that they eventually marry by using those sites. What I do suggest is, if indeed you find someone on one of those dating sites and you begin to communicate with each other online and do feel some attraction and do feel that you have some similarities, spend time together in the real world before you make the decision to marry. That is, whatever you have to do, whether it's traveling to where they are or sometimes maybe even moving if that's possible. So you'll be close enough that you can spend some time together with the real person, not just the person that you're seeing online. I'm not opposed to those sites. I think they can be very helpful, particularly in today's world. But I also would encourage you to be involved in a local church, and many churches in a community do have events for single adults. In this case, of course, you're a widow, so I don't know how old you would be, but there are churches where you can meet people as well on the local scene.
Yeah. She mentioned that it's been 10 years, and I just sense from what she said that she's done some work. She's grieved well the loss of her husband, and it sounds like she's saying, I think I'm ready to move back into, some kind of relationship, long-term relationship that will eventually lead to marriage. I see a lot of hope in what she's saying, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. She's not simply saying, I'm designed to be a widow the rest of my life. God may well have someone for her. On the other hand, that may not be God's plan for her. And I think she has to keep open to that also. But there's certainly nothing wrong with reaching out and seeking to develop friendships with the possibility that one of them may lead to marriage.
Our featured resource today is the book by Dr. Chapman, A Teen's Guide to the 5 Love Languages, How to Understand Yourself and Improve All Your Relationships. You can find out more about it at buildingrelationships.us. Again, go to buildingrelationships.us. This next call is from a husband in a really difficult place, Gary. Here's his situation.
Hi, Gary. My question is in regards to loving my wife while she is away. We've been together 2 years, married for 1. No children together. She has 2, one 17 and 1 5-year-old. She knows me only as dad, and I have a 10-year-old also. We have both struggled with addictions in the past. I went to a Christian center in Minnesota some years ago. When I came home, I met my wife, and she was also in recovery. Right now, She is in a rehab center. I just dropped her off there the other day, and she's going to be there for 90 days. And it's just me and our son. And I have a great support group. I just, I wanna love her the best way I can, and I miss her already. And I just want to know what's the best way for me to love her, even though I can't really see her or talk to her. How do I do that? Thanks.
Well, first of all, let me say I'm encouraged to know that she is in a recovery center because, as you well know, addiction is not something that necessarily we get over and we never, ever have a problem again. And so it's not abnormal that we might fall back into that addiction. So the fact that she is reaching out, she is in a recovery center, that's a very, very positive thing. I think you have to recognize, of course, it's temporary. You mentioned 90 days. Well, when you've only been married a year, 90 days is a long time because you have to live it one day at a time. I think one way you can love her is by doing everything you can to take care of the child or children that are still in the home while she is away. If there's no contact at all allowed with her, that is no phone calls, no letters or anything, then you don't have an option. If they do allow letters or it wouldn't be, I don't think it would be online, but if they do allow letters, then you can write her a letter and just tell her how proud you are of her, that she is dealing with this, and you want her to know that you pray for her every day, that you love her very much, and that you're doing everything you can to make this a positive time for the children. That, I think, is probably the best thing you can do at this point. Obviously, praying that God will use this recovery time to really help her break the bondage of this addiction, because we all need outside help when it comes to breaking addictions. And so you're just praying that God will intervene and give her the power to do what on the human level is very, very difficult to do. So I think you've got a good heart. I think you've got the right spirit. And I think if you simply do what you can do at this juncture, which is rather limited right now, but also being strong for her when she does come home and seeking to grow immediately when she comes home. Love her, whatever her love language is. If you've never read the 5 love languages, I'd say read that and try to figure out what her primary love language is. So when she does come home, you can communicate love to her in the language that is most meaningful to her emotionally.
I got another idea to throw in there. If he can't write a letter to her or send her an email or whatever, what if he keeps a 90-day journal, and this is what's happening today, and this is what I'm thinking about you, even though she won't see that until she comes home after 90 days, she'll see the process that he went through and the notes that he took and the things that he was thinking throughout that time. What do you think?
I think that's a fabulous idea, Chris. Absolutely.
I get a gold star. I get a gold star, don't I?
Yeah, it's good for him because he's writing out his thoughts and feelings and what's going on. And it will be very encouraging to her when she does get out and takes time to read through that. Yeah. Great idea.
Well, okay, just one more thing that I thought as I heard his voice, and he said he's got a great support group, and I think that is key. You know, if you're taking care of and you're working and you're taking care of a child yourself, taking care of himself might be the most important thing that he does for her while she's away, because he could also slip back into some addiction, numb himself from the pain of, not having her around in some way, shape or form. So taking care of himself is a gift to her as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Because, when the prodigal son left, the father didn't run after him. The father kept the farm going. So when God did bring that son to a place, kind of the end of the road, he had a home to come back to. So I think, yes, taking care of himself so that when she does come home, you are in a healthy place would certainly be important.
Thank you for calling with that question, because my guess is there's somebody listening right now who's in the same situation, or your voice talking about this decision that your wife made to go into treatment might encourage somebody else to say, you know what? That's what I need in my life. So your calls, your questions really help us to kind of dig under the surface of what's going on in your life. And if you want to ask a question or respond to something today, you can call 1-866-424-GARY. Leave your message for a future broadcast, 1-866-424-4279. Gary, we had a call a few weeks ago from a listener who was a widower, and he was looking for some good resources for what he was going through. That's where our next caller comes in.
Hi, Gary. I'm calling in response to the widower who called and asked for a book about grief. I lost my husband 15 years ago. I also attended Grief Share, which, as you said, is a very excellent program. I would, however, like to suggest the book, Getting to the Other Side of Grief. I found that a very helpful book because it's written by people who also lost their spouses and then they married each other. I have given about 30 copies to friends over this country who have lost their loved ones, and everyone who has spoken to me about it afterwards said it was a big help. So the book is Getting to the Other Side of Grief. I hope that helped. Good day.
Well, Chris, I'm glad she called because, listen, I know we have many listeners who are going through grief, who've lost a spouse or lost another family member. And the book she's recommending is a good book. And so I'm glad she called and is sharing that with our audience. Getting to the Other Side of Grief. And she also mentioned what I had suggested also, going to a grief share program. Yes. Many churches, particularly larger churches, have grief share. And so it's actually where you go to a meeting with others who are going through this. And it's a program for several weeks that really, really has helped thousands of people work through grief in a very meaningful way.
I like that title. I haven't read the book, but a lot of people will say, when am I going to get over this? When are you going to get over, start living again? It's not about getting over. Getting to the other side of it puts a different spin, because if you've loved somebody really well and you've lost that person, there is no real getting over it. You're always going to have that pain, that heart tug every time you think of that person, right?
Yeah, and I think, Chris, there's nothing wrong with thinking about a person that you've lost and reflecting upon the positive things in the experience that you had in life. And I've found that sometimes, even after widows or widowers do remarry later in the journey, not everyone does, but when they do, I've encouraged them to have openness to talk about their former spouse, with each other. I think that's very, very healthy because you're being honest. Both of you know you've had a loss in your life and you had a history with that person. And so we don't just act like, they didn't exist. Far healthier to share with each other, positive memories or sometimes, struggles that you may have had in that relationship, because you're sharing life together with each other, but you both have a history with someone else. So let's be open and honest about our history. I think that can be extremely helpful for couples who do remarry.
This is Building Relationships with Dr. Gary Chapman. You can find out more about some of the resources we talk about here today at the website, buildingrelationships.us. I need to put a disclaimer before this next call, Gary. It could make you a tad bit hungry. All right, you have been warned. Here we go.
Hi, Dr. Gary. My wife and I love the love languages. We're very fortunate that we share the two same primary love languages, those being physical touch and also words of affirmation. We were excited to see the cross-promotion you had with Van Leeuwen's ice cream. I brought home a couple of pints and had a funny moment when I gave my wife her pint of let's hang out some more, quality time. And she said, but quality time isn't one of my primary love languages. And I said, no, but s'mores is one of your favorite flavors. We both got a chuckle, and it made for a great Valentine's.
Well, I'm finding a lot of folks who are discovering the 5 love languages with different ice creams. And I think it's a fun thing, if you like ice cream, to recognize that to have an ice cream flavor that goes with a particular love language, it can be a fun thing, whether it's Valentine's Day or whether it could be any day if you're an ice cream person, okay?
I love it, but you are making me hungry. So that reminds me, we throw around this 5 love languages thing. It's in the culture. Everybody knows it, quote unquote. But there may be somebody who's listening. I've never heard the 5 love languages. Would you walk me through those? What are the 5 love languages?
All right. One of them is words of affirmation. You look nice in that outfit. I really appreciate what you did. Just looking for words that you can affirm them for something about them. Words of affirmation. And then there's acts of service, doing something for the person. In a marriage, such things as cooking meals, washing dishes, vacuuming floors, putting gas in their car, just anything that you know they would like for you to do. Remember the old saying, actions speak louder than words? If this is their love language, actions will speak louder than words. Then there's gifts. It's universal to give gifts as an expression of love. The gift says, they were thinking about me. Look what they got for me. And the gift doesn't have to be expensive, but it's something that relates to them as a person, that maybe you've heard them express the desire. I'd like to have one of those someday. But it's giving gifts. And then number 4 is quality time. Giving the other person your undivided attention. I do not mean sitting on the couch watching television. Someone else has your attention. TV is off, computer is down, we're not answering our phone. We're giving each other our full attention, sharing whatever we want to share with each other. We can be sitting around the house, we can be taking a walk down the road, but it's giving them our full attention. And then number 5 is physical touch, affirming physical touches. In a marriage, it'd be such things as kissing, holding hands, embracing, the whole sexual part of the marriage, arm around the shoulder, putting your hand on their leg as you're driving down the road, just affirming touches. And of course, Chris, the basic idea of the book is that out of those 5 languages, each of us has what I call a primary love language. One speaks more deeply to us emotionally than the other 4. And if you don't speak your spouse's primary love language, they will not feel loved, even though you're speaking some of the other languages. It's a simple concept, but it absolutely can transform a marriage when each of you starts speaking the other person's primary love language.
And for teenagers, this goes for you too. It goes for all ages. But there may be somebody, so now you know what the 5 love languages are. But there might be somebody who's asking, wait a minute, you just talked about ice cream. There was a company that came out, this was back closer to Valentine's Day, that came out with 5 different flavors with each of those as a theme. And I think in the little pint containers, they were kind of pink or darker pink, lighter pink, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it was just a promotional thing for them. They just picked up on the 5 love language concept and got permission to use that. so it's been a fun thing.
Yeah. There's one who's, you're my brown sugar cookie butter. It's meant to taste like words of affirmation. Hug me hazelnut truffle. That must be the physical touch, right?
Yes, that's physical touch.
So your idea that you came up with back in the 1990s is if you figure out what this person that you love, how they hear love or how they feel loved, and speak that, you're going to get through, right?
Yeah, that's right, Chris. Almost everyone agrees that one of our deepest emotional needs on the human level is the need to feel loved by the significant people in our lives. And if it's a husband and wife, that's the most important relationship. If you feel loved by your spouse, life is beautiful. But if you don't feel loved, life can begin to look pretty dark. So it's a simple concept on how to effectively meet each other's emotional need for love.
You're listening to the Building Relationships with Dr. Gary Chapman podcast. He's the New York Times bestselling author of The 5 Love Languages. For more simple ways to strengthen your relationships, go to 5lovelanguages.com. Our featured resource today is Dr. Chapman's book, A Teen's Guide to the 5 Love Languages. Again, go to 5lovelanguages.com to find out more.
This is our Dear Gary broadcast for the month of March, and we would love to hear from you if you have a question or maybe you want to follow up something that you've heard today on the program. Call us, 1-866-424-GARY. Leave your message, and we might use your question or comment right here on the program. 1-866-424-4279. All right, here's a real-life situation in a home that I don't think you can solve in 5 minutes, Gary, to be honest with you, but I want to hear what you will say about this marriage issue.
Hi, Gary. My husband and I have been married for 9 years. This is our fourth marriage for both of us. I have 3 children, a son and 2 daughters. He has a son. They're all grown. My youngest daughter is chronically ill and most likely only has about 2 years left to live. She's 32. She also has 2 daughters. They're living in the house with us now. This has caused major strain on our marriage because my husband cannot stand my daughter, and the reason for that, and this is his words, is because he views her health problems as a result of choices that she made, and he's partially right. She's diabetic, and she chose to have children, which in turn damaged her kidneys, and she's in stage 4 kidney failure for the second time. She's also got heart problems. But this has caused a major strain on our marriage because I have to be there and take care of my daughter and her daughters. And I was in the hospital with her last year for 3 months. He would not call me to ask how I was, if I needed anything, how she was. The only times he called was to complain that he had the sniffles and that one of our cats had died and what a bad day he was having at work. Well, I was dealing with possibly losing my daughter at the time. And I just wanted to know what your advice is on this. We are going to counseling, and he even told the counselor that he felt like he was being replaced. How can I make this better? Thank you for your advice.
Well, you have to be empathetic with this mother and wife who's rather caught in the middle between trying to care for her daughter and her grandchildren and also her husband at the same time. It's a very, very difficult situation. There's no question about that. So I can understand her frustration. I think also anyone can understand her husband's frustration that if she's gone for 3 months caring for her daughter and the grandchildren and has no contact with him, you can sense how he would feel that he's a second fiddle in her mind. At the same time, you also say, well, wait a minute. I mean, that's her daughter. You don't want her to walk away from her daughter. So it's a very, very hard situation. One of the things I would say if I were talking to him is this. I can understand how you would feel that your wife has not put you as number one in the relationship. But I want you to try to see it through a mother's eyes. It's called empathy. See it through the mother's eyes. Here's my daughter. Yes, she made wrong choices. Yes, some of the things that she's suffering physically are because of some wrong choices that she made. But she's still my daughter. And I'm the one that can care for her. Who else is going to care for her? And those grandchildren, I mean, I love them, and they deserve someone that loves them. So I think we tend to see things only through our own eyes, not through the eyes of the other person. But if you put yourself in their eyes and look at the world through their eyes, you can come to understand why they do what they do. And it doesn't mean you like it. It doesn't mean it's ideal. But you see why they want to do that, why she wants to do that, and that she's not rejecting you. It's just that at this juncture in her life and the life of her daughter, she feels like this is something she must do as a loving mother. So I think we have to be empathetic with the other person. I think on her side, she also needs to be empathetic with him. Honey, I can see how you would feel that way. That makes sense to me. But at this juncture, I don't have an option. Think about military couples. They're sometimes separated not for 3 months, but for a whole year sometimes. And yet they can have good marriages if we keep in touch with each other. So it's a matter of saying, okay, this is the situation we're in right now, but let's keep in touch with each other rather than isolating each other. Let's reach out. Today, technology allows you to do that and see each other face to face and talk on the phone face to face. So utilize the ability to communicate with each other, to be empathetic with each other, let each other know, I love you, I'm praying for you, and share life with each other while you're walking through this, rather than just withdrawing and feeling sorry for yourself. It's a matter of choosing an attitude of love. Jesus said about himself, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life a ransom for others. He is our model. And if we choose not to be self-centered, but to choose love and ask, how can I minister to my spouse during this time in our relationship? Then you're going to reach out and find ways to love her, and she reaches back to find ways to love you. And if you understand each other's love language, it'll make it even easier. But you see, sometimes it boils down to, am I going to have a selfish attitude or am I going to have a loving attitude? Love reaches out to serve the other person and try to help them in the situation that they're now in. To me, that's the approach if there's going to be a healthy relationship developed in this situation.
And I was thinking about it from a 5 love languages perspective. What if, and I'm not saying this is what's going on, but what if her love language is acts of service? You know, she does a lot for her daughter. And what if his is quality time? Then you've got that, you know, that they're kind of butting heads with he's not feeling loved and she's not feeling love, from him. Being empathetic. I think the most hopeful thing that I've heard in all of that and what she described is they're going to counseling. They are, yes. They're having a problem, but they're going to counseling. That's a good sign, I think.
That is a good sign, Chris. Always a good sign. When two people are willing to go for counseling, there's always hope because they have an outside voice who's both hearing each of them, understanding their perspectives, and helping them understand each other and how they might work this out in a positive way, even though it's a difficult time. Yeah, that's very positive that they're reaching out for counseling.
You know, the other thing that went through my mind is from his perspective. I wish he would call and we could talk with him. But if her daughter only has a year or two to live, then there's going to be a long time after that the mom is going to be dealing with that loss. And what kind of regret can he not have 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road? What can he do right now so that he doesn't have to look back in regret at the way that he handled this situation? I'm not telling him, I'm not giving him advice other than if you look down the trail a little bit, it might help you right now with the struggles that you're having with your daughter.
Yeah, I think acknowledging that, it's a hard time right now. This is not very pleasant, but it's not going to be forever. So let's make the most of where we are and find out how we can love each other in the midst of the present situation. And then when it gets better, it gets better. But let's face it, everybody faces hard times along the journey of life. And so if we don't learn how to love each other in the midst of struggle and hardship, then we go through divorce. And this lady mentioned that each of them has already this is their 4th marriage.
Right.
Well, maybe this is the time for them to learn how to love each other in difficult situations, because love is a choice. It doesn't begin with a feeling. It begins with a choice. I want to enrich your life. That's the attitude of love. And you each have that attitude toward each other. So the question is, how can I best do that at this juncture in our relationship, facing the realities that we now have?
And again, if you want to ask a question of Dr. Chapman, or you heard our last caller and you say, here's our situation that's similar to this, you want to give a little bit of advice of your own from your own experience, 866-424-GARY is our number. Call, leave your message. You might hear your comment or question on a future broadcast. 1-866-424-4279. I love it when listeners hear something and they want to add to the conversation. On a previous program, you took a call about a man whose wife had a concussion, Gary. Here's our next caller.
Hey, Gary. I'm calling because I just heard the caller regarding the question about his wife and having suffered a concussion and also now some unfortunate possible effect in their relationship, especially on the side of sexually. I'm in the healthcare business. I am not a doctor, but that said, I think another consideration for the caller to discuss with his wife and the provider is menopause. One of the major issues is also sexual desire, is affected. She should consider, and even between the age of 40 and above, this could start happening. So that's something to consider. Unfortunately, many people don't discuss this. For some reason, they're ashamed of this, but this is a real issue. And it's something that many couples can walk through and work through, especially if they're believers. So I wish everyone luck, and I thank you for the station.
Well, I appreciate the caller sharing that. I think when we hear things, whether I'm speaking or anybody else is speaking, and you have ideas that were not surfaced, it's wonderful that you share those things with us and with our listeners. Yeah, I have always encouraged couples to have open conversation about the sexual part of marriage. We don't make progress in any area of marriage without communication. And so talking about this part of the relationship is important. And working through a Christian book that deals with this topic is also important. And I say Christian book because a lot of times non-Christian books in this particular area can suggest things that I think are not biblical. But working through a book like this, like reading a chapter and then saying, well, what can we learn from this? And I deal with this in several of my books. For example, The Marriage You've Always Wanted. I have a chapter on this open communication for couples in this part of the marriage. So I think it's really important, and I appreciate this caller sharing that with us.
Here's something that just struck me, Gary. Husband and wife driving down the road and you're listening. Here's a great question. Turn to your spouse and ask this. If you could hear any topic discussed on building relationships, anything that you would like to hear Dr. Chapman talk about or have a guest on, what would it be? You ask that question and then listen well and then ask why. Why would you like to hear that? Because the topics that your spouse wants to see addressed, there's a reason why that's there. And it's the same with our next caller, because I know that you're open to just about any topic that we could discuss here on the program. There's a caller who called 866-424-GARY and left a suggestion. Here it is.
Hi, Gary. I would like if you could cover the topic of singles who are actually already parents, because some of us became Christians after having children, and some of us have never married and we have children. And I'd love if you could cover that topic and how we can connect with other singles, not for the dating aspect, but where do we belong, I guess, because we're not the married, we're not the young people that are in the campus ministries. We're this particular niche, and there's a lot of us, but we're not all in the same churches. So if you could cover that at some point, I think that would be awesome. And I look forward to hearing what you have to say about what single parents need to do since we are technically singles. Thank you so much for everything you're doing and all the wisdom you share.
Well, this mother is describing the situation of thousands of single moms in this country. Many reasons for that. As she said, sometimes they had children before they got married, and now they're single. They never married the father of the child. Sometimes it's been a divorce, but there are literally thousands of single moms in this country. And it's not an easy journey because, in reality, the ideal is that every child will have a mother and a father with whom they can relate, because they need to have a model of what a Christian husband looks like and what a Christian mother looks like. Well, a single mom cannot take the place of a Christian father to that child, but she can be a Christian mother to that child. And again, loving that child as a mother, understanding the 5 love languages, and that if you have 2 children, they probably have different primary love languages. And so you got to learn to speak each other's primary language, plus speak the other 4, because we want the child to learn how to receive love and later give love in all 5 languages. The other thing I would say is, if there is a Christian father or male in the extended family, it could be an uncle, it could be a grandfather, who would be willing to spend time with that child, that would be ideal, that the child would have at least a father figure in their lives, even if it's not a literal father. So I think whatever you can do to expose that child to men, it would be helpful as well. It complements what you're doing. That can often be done in the context of a church. And having the child in a church and in a children's program geared to their age, because many times the teachers of those classes are males and females. So that's a great place for your child to find exposure to a male figure as well who is a Christian. So I think that could be very, very helpful. As she said, she's not interested in going online just trying to find a husband. I mean, if God wants her to have a husband, then she's going to keep open to that reality. But she wants to be a faithful mother where she is. And I think that's the desire of all Christian mothers who are single moms. So there are churches, of course, that have programs for single mothers. And I think if you find one in your community, that would certainly be worth attending that. And sometimes they have classes along that line as well. And then there are books, I think, that could help you. I have not written a book for single mothers. I've written a book for singles, but not dealing with the parental aspect. But I do encourage single moms to reach out and seek to find someone, and not necessarily one, it can be more than one, but someone who can be a father figure for those children. I think it will be an asset to the children if you can do that.
Yeah. The heart cry that I hear from her, and I think it's a lot of people, maybe not in her specific situation, but it's, as far as the church goes, is where do I belong? Where do I fit in here? I don't feel like I'm kind of untethered. I'm lost in space. I remember watching that as a kid. I'm dating myself now, but lost in space, and it goes on this spacewalk outside, and the hands are going up. It's like, where am I? Do I matter? Does anybody see me here? And I just want to say to that person, God sees you. He knows what you're going through. And then to those who are leaders in the church, how can you come alongside her and offer help? Or for the single dad, I hear from a lot of single dads too, Gary.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Chris. I think if a church would announce that they're going to have a meeting, just a meeting or a dinner for single mothers, and there'll be child care for those children, they might be shocked at the number of people that would come to that. And then if they decide to do that once a month, those single mothers would reach out with other single mothers, and that meeting would grow. I can almost guarantee it would grow. Because you're right. They often feel like, I don't fit anywhere. I don't fit in the singles ministry because they're all singles without children. I don't fit with the married group because I'm not married. So, yeah, it is a challenge for the individual, and it's also a challenge for the church. And I would just encourage you, if there are church leaders who are listening to us today, that you explore the possibility of starting some kind of ministry to single mothers.
Well, as you've listened here today, you've heard some really deep calls, some great calls, life situations. And if you want to lend your voice to the effort, call us at 866-424-GARY. Leave a question, leave a comment. We just love to hear your voice. You can talk about ice cream, too, if you'd like. 1-866-424-GARY. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to check out our featured resource, the book by Dr. Chapman, A Teen's Guide to the 5 Love Languages, How to Understand Yourself and Improve All Your Relationships. You can find out more at the website buildingrelationships.us.
And next week, how to build spiritual habits in the home.
Discover some small steps you can take in 1 week. Before we go, let me thank our production team, Steve Wick and Janice Backing. Building Relationships with Dr. Gary Chapman is a production of Moody Radio in Chicago in association with Moody Publishers, a ministry of Moody Bible Institute. Thanks for listening.